My name is Shirley Higuchi, and I'm chair of the Heart Mountain, Wyoming Foundation. Thanks for tuning in today. I will be reading an excerpt from my book, Setsuko's Secret, Heart Mountain and the Legacy of the Japanese American Incarceration. This is the first chapter of my book about the Issei, focused on my grandparents. I hope you enjoy the reading. My paternal grandfather, Higuchi Hirata, prepared to leave the country of his birth for a second time in 1915. A few years earlier, he had sailed across the Pacific Ocean from his home in Saga Prefecture on Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's 4 home islands, to South America, where he worked on the farms of Peru. But the conditions there were too harsh, even for the stubborn and resilient Higuchi, the middle of 3 sons, so he left for home. He knew, however, that he would have to leave Saga again for the same reason he had left before. Times were hard and opportunities limited for all but a family's firstborn son. His second voyage across the Pacific was to California, but he did not go alone. Days before he embarked, he had married another villager, Chie Shiki, who was 11 years his junior. Her family considered her so intelligent that they had prepared her to be one of the few women in Japan to attend college, but she cast her lot with Higuchi instead. Bound for a strange new country, both bore a new name, Higuchi, the surname of his mother's family, which had no male heir. When they landed in California, Higuchi and Chie Higuchi joined the tens of thousands of other Issei, first-generation Japanese immigrants trying to coax a living out of the state's rich soil. My paternal grandparents, like thousands of other Japanese immigrants, gravitated to Santa Clara County, a lush agricultural region south of San Francisco. What the world now knows as Silicon Valley was then marked by small vegetable farms and orchards. The Higuchis first rented a farm from a white family in Los Altos, where their oldest son James was born in 1915, followed by Kiyoshi a year later, and Takeru on New Year's Day, 1918. The entire family struggled to make a living as they tried to raise plums and save enough money to buy their own farm. Higuchi would pick the plums and then dip them in a lye solution to prepare them for drying. A heavy storm in 1919 washed out the plums, leaving Higuchi shaking his head and muttering, "Zenmetsu, Zenmetsu, total loss, total loss." By 1922, the family had moved to Mountain View, where they lived in a home built of redwood planks with newspaper layered over the walls to cover the cracks. Their home held one symbol of Japan, the large wooden bathtub Higuchi had built, and that was heated by a wood-burning stove. Their children soon attended the local school in Mountain View, but because the Higuchis spoke only Japanese at home, James, Kiyoshi, and Takeru understood virtually no English. When James started first grade, he did not know what his teacher or any of his fellow students were saying. One day, James had to go to the bathroom, but he did not know how to ask his teacher for permission to go. "I finally let it go in my pants," he said, "and I remember the agony of walking home with poop running down my legs." The immigrants, known as the Issei, and their children, the second generation or Nisei, began to thrive. American farmers envied how the Japanese turned marginal land profitable through intensive farming techniques that required them to tend each plant by hand. However, banks still refused to lend money to Japanese businesses, and Issei and Nisei alike still needed help navigating a legal and political system rigged against them. They created dozens of organizations to help them cope, and by 1929, the Japanese American Citizens League, known as JACL, was created by merging these groups together. The JACL aimed to protect the citizen rights of Japanese American and its leader was Saburo Kido, a San Francisco lawyer and Hawaii-born Issei. When my grandfather Higuchi needed to buy his first farm in San Jose, he and his two oldest sons, James and Kiyoshi, went to Kido's office, where he drafted the documents that put the Higuchi farm for Iakichi, the symbol of his 13 years of toil as a sharecropper, into the ownership of his 13 and 12-year-old sons, who not yet were old enough to drive. They now owned a 14.25-acre farm in San Jose. They left, as James recalled, the relatively carefree life of a sharecropper for the greater responsibility of owning a farm. I had never understood why my grandfather put the farm in the names of his children. Only later, I learned that the discriminatory alien land law of the time had made it necessary. My grandfather Higuchi's raspberry farm succeeded beyond his dreams, and he shared his prosperity by allowing some of the Mexican families who worked on the nearby farms to live on the family's 14 acres rent-free. Their children, particularly those of the Briones family, became some of the first playmates for my father, who was born on March 16, 1931, 13 years after his brother Takuru. Unlike his older brother, he grew up speaking more Spanish than Japanese. By 1936, when my Aunt Emily was born, the older sons had begun to leave home. James finished high school and headed to San Jose State University and then to medical school. The third son, Takuru, followed suit and then went to graduate school at the University of Wisconsin to study chemistry. But Kiyoshi, the second son, fell ill with pleurisy. Although it is now easily treated with antibiotics, the illness confined Kiyoshi to bed for 4 years. My grandmother Higuchi treated him with love and her nurturing home remedies, and often wheeled him into the sun to watch Bill play with the Briones' children. Thank you so much for tuning in on my chapter on the Issei. Next week, we will discuss the resistors, the brave young men who resisted the draft during World War II while they were confined behind barbed wire. Thank you very much for joining me, and see you next week.